Peeling Back the Mask. A Quest to the Real. John Dube. Friends, let me explain the danger of hagiography in simple words. Hagiography is when we only talk about the good parts of a person's life and ignore their mistakes. This one-sided praise can trick us into thinking a leader was perfect, even when they had serious faults. When we only see one side, we miss important lessons from history. We need to know the whole truth, the good and the bad, to learn and make better choices. In this video, I'm going to tell you the true story of John Dube's time as president of the ANC. I'll share why leaders like Sefako Magatho and Sol Plaatje decided to get rid of him. The truth is, John Dube wasn't sincere. He seemed to be hiding something from the people, and many believed he wasn't really fighting for the cause. This story is about a man who spoke a lot, but didn't stand up for the real change that was needed. Let's look at the truth behind why he was removed and the reasons his leadership failed. Join me as we reveal the real story of a leader who talked too much but did nothing for the people. Where was John Dube during the time when all black leaders descended to Bloemfontein in the Orange Free State in 1912 to discuss black issues? I mean, where was John Dube when the ANC was formed? What were his excuses not to attend this August event that was in planning and preparation for many years? Why did he at the 11th hour somersaulted and took a nosedive and refused to attend the event? On that historic day in 1912, when visionary black leaders converged on Bloemfontein to forge what would become the African National Congress, John Dube was nowhere to be found. Instead of standing shoulder to shoulder with those daring enough to challenge an oppressive order, John Dube chose to remain in Natal, entrenched in his routine duties under the guise of missionary and educational obligations. Consider the gravity of the moment. A meticulously planned gathering, long in the making, designed to alter the course of Black South African history. Yet at the 11th hour, while his peers answered the call of destiny, John Dube conveniently retreated into the safe confines of his established sphere. His excuses, a feeble litany of prior commitments and purported ill health, claims that, when measured against the momentous significance of the meeting, ring hollow and betray a startling lack of resolve. His absence was not the result of unavoidable circumstance. It was a calculated evasion, a somersault away from the crucible of change. By shirking his responsibility at a time when every capable black leader was needed to ignite a spark of resistance, John Dube not only missed a pivotal opportunity to help steer the course of history, but also cast a long, dark shadow over his legacy. John Dube's record is one that reeks of opportunism and profound neglect of duty. Elected president in absentia, a leader chosen not for his courageous vision, but rather for his eloquence and smooth talking, Dube abandoned the front lines at a time when his presence was indispensable. While black leaders gathered with resolute determination in Bloemfontein in 1912 to forge a future free from oppression, Dube shirked his responsibilities with flimsy excuses. His failure was not a matter of circumstance, but a deliberate retreat from the historic challenge laid before him. In the subsequent year, when the Draconian Land Act of 1913 was enacted, a ruthless piece of legislation that snatched land from black communities and laid bare the colonial government's greed, Dube's silence was deafening. I mean, he was president of the ANC. He did not even lift one finger against such act of dispossessions that will define the trajectory of South Africa. Not a single act. Not a single statement of critique. He cocooned in relative satisfaction and kind of said, "Let the sleeping dogs lie." What kind of leader is that? What is the purpose of having a leader who at the times of needs says nothing? Instead of mobilizing his people or countering the injustices with decisive action, he remained inert, betraying the trust of those who looked to him for leadership. His inaction allowed the devastating policies to take hold, deepening the wounds of an already exploited people. Critics were scathing. One contemporary voice summed it up: "I wish that somebody more trustworthy is the president. This man's smooth talking should not deceive us." These words encapsulate the anger and disillusionment of a community that had placed its hope in a man who, when faced with the momentous tasks of resistance and reform, proved to be all talk and no substance. John Dube's legacy is forever marred by his conspicuous absence at a pivotal moment in history and his subsequent failure to act when the very survival of his people was at stake. Leadership has to do with what a group of human beings do to adapt to the demands of their environment. History is not a sanctuary for the uncritical glorification of individuals. It is a discipline that demands rigorous analysis, honesty, and accountability. To shy away from criticizing historical figures simply because they are deceased is to betray the very purpose of studying history, to learn, to understand, and to grow. Criticism doesn't dishonor someone. On the contrary, it helps protect the truth and ensures that we don't blindly follow a faulty legacy. So, let's not shy away from speaking the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Our aim is not to disrespect, but to ensure we learn from the past and create a future that truly benefits all. John Dube's election as president of the ANC, despite his absence from the Bloemfontein meeting, is a baffling and indefensible decision. How could a man who was not present to contribute to the debates, shape the resolutions, or understand the nuances of the discussions be entrusted with the leadership of such a critical movement? This decision reeks of either political expediency or a lack of principled leadership within the ranks of the founding members. The absence of John Dube during the formative discussions meant that the ANC was, in effect, led by someone who had no direct hand in crafting its vision, goals, or strategies. This raises serious questions about the coherence and authenticity of the organization's early direction. How could John Dube, who was not part of the debates, fully understand or champion the resolutions that emerged from Bloemfontein? His leadership, therefore, was built on shaky ground, lacking the legitimacy that comes from active participation and engagement. John Dube was a public figure who played a significant role in shaping the course of South Africa's history. His actions or inactions had profound consequences for the struggle against oppression. To hold him accountable for his decisions is not an act of disrespect. It is an act of intellectual integrity. We owe it to future generations to present a balanced and truthful account of history, not a sanitized version that glosses over the complexities and contradictions of its key figures. Criticism is not the same as disrespect. John Dube's contributions to education, his role in founding Olange Institute, and his early leadership in the ANC are undeniable and worthy of celebration. However, his absence at the Bloemfontein meeting in 1912 and his sleeping easy and saying nothing when land was taken from blacks in 1913 are legitimate points of critique. To ignore these issues would be to dishonor the very principles of justice and accountability that John Dube himself espoused. The Natives' Land Act of 1913 was not just a policy, it was an act of systemic violence that dispossessed millions of black South Africans, destroyed livelihoods, and entrenched racial inequality for generations. It was a cornerstone of apartheid and a direct attack on the dignity, autonomy, and survival of black people. For the president of the ANC, John Dube, an organization founded to resist such oppression, to remain silent in the face of this atrocity is nothing short of a betrayal. As president of the ANC, John Dube had a moral and political obligation to lead the resistance against the Land Act. Yet, history shows that he said nothing. No fiery speeches, no organized protests, no mobilization of the masses. He did not even lift a small finger. Dube's silence stands in stark contrast to the actions of other leaders who recognized the gravity of the Land Act. Sol Plaatje and Sefako Magato, for example, traveled across the country to document the devastating effects of the act and lobbied internationally for its repeal. Sol Plaatje and Sefako Magato activism highlighted what true leadership looks like in the face of injustice. John Dube, on the other hand, failed to rise to the occasion, leaving a gaping void in the resistance movement. While he is rightly celebrated for his contributions to education, his silence during this pivotal moment cannot be ignored. It is a reminder that leadership is not just about titles or achievements. It is about courage, conviction, and the willingness to stand up for justice, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Dube's inaction during the Land Act crisis represents a profound missed opportunity, one that cost Black South Africans dearly. The criticism of John Dube's silence during the Land Act of 1913 is not an attempt to erase his contributions, but to hold him accountable for his failures. History is not kind to those who remain silent in the face of injustice, and John Dube's legacy must be examined in its entirety, both the good and the bad. His inaction during this critical moment is a stain on his leadership and a reminder of the high cost of silence. Let us not shy away from this truth, for it is only by confronting the past honestly that we can build a more just and equitable future.